Today's lecture will be on angelic and demonic invocational and ritual magic and its relationship to the development of Faustian drama in particular. Angelic and demonic invocational magic began to rise in popularity in the late Middle Ages. And during that time, the late Middle Ages saw an increase in ritual magical texts that included rituals. And some of these were texts of experimental magic that involved the invocation of demons, while some of these were more Christian in character, such as the manuscript Ars Notoria and the Sworn Book of Honorius. And both of these have invocations for invoking angels and other divine entities, mostly to enhance one's intellect and creativity by granting divine wisdom. Magical books in the Middle Ages were being copied and transmitted by literate people. So magical texts were created in literary circles, such as monastic settings, clerical settings, courts, and universities. So magical texts give evidence that there was an alternative current of spirituality surrounding magic. In the Middle Ages and in the Renaissance, one could be arrested or executed for heretical beliefs, and magic in all forms was widely viewed as heretical. People who wrote positively about magic were in political and legal danger because between the 13th century and the dawn of the 19th century, they could be arrested and even executed for working with such things. But despite all of this, there were many people interested in practicing magic in the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and so decisions about the divine or demonic nature of magic was a question that was left up to individual practitioners who used magic at their own peril. Magical books and literature blended Christian beliefs and symbolisms with those of Arabic, Jewish, classic, and other ancient sources. So magic fell into a category of alternative spirituality and religion in its time period, as it still does to this day. Ritual magic refers to a genre of magical literature that contains rituals that enable one to gain knowledge or magical powers through ritual action, combined with other magical tools and practices. And some subgenres of ritual magic include angelic magic, astral magic, theurgic magic, and demonic magic. And collections of ritual magic often contain several of the same subgenres within their own pages. So these medieval manuscripts and Renaissance manuscripts often contained all kinds of different ritual magic in them, from the angelic to the demonic. Angelic ritual magic emerges as a major form during the later Middle Ages, and it continues throughout the Renaissance. The most significant angelic ritual text is the Ars Notoria, which claims to provide a method for acquiring spiritual or intellectual gifts from the Holy Spirit or other angelic intermediary beings. And intermediary beings are beings that work as a communicator and a bestower of magical gifts and powers between the divine realm and the ritual magician. Another significant magical text is the Sworn Book of Honorius, which provides a 28-day ritual that will result in a beatific vision, which is a blissful vision, blissful spiritual vision. Angelic magic, such as that which is in these manuscripts, rely on aesthetic and religious observances, prayer that directly addresses the Judeo-Christian God, the Trinity, Mary, the saints, etc., contemplative exercises using complex figures or devotional images. You probably have seen images of the fancy symbols in magical texts, such as the one on this slide, which is from the Sworn Book. And those symbols themselves are thought to have divine power to help connect you with divine intelligences. Angelic ritual magic is often so orthodox with its prayers and liturgical sources that sometimes its manuscripts have been mistaken for orthodox books of prayer rather than books of magical rituals. Probably the most famous of the angelic magicians is John Dee, 16th and 17th century, really Renaissance man who worked in many different areas, but he was a very well-known occultist and magician. And John Dee worked for Elizabeth I of England, who was a queen at the time when Shakespeare was writing his plays. And some have surmised that John Dee was the inspiration for the character of Prospero in Shakespeare's play The Tempest. This image on this slide is an image of The Tempest that I directed here at UT. And you see on that image some strange letters around the stage. And that is actually a replica on the stage of John Dee's Holy Table for communicating with angels. And it has letters from a language called the Enochian language that John Dee claimed to have received from angels during sessions of what he called scrying. That involves looking into a mirror and hearing voices and seeing visions from angels and writing down what is said. I put a link here so you can learn a bit more about John Dee and his methods of magic. Now, demonic ritual magic in Renaissance times and in the Middle Ages began to be referred to as necromancy. Now, in the ancient times, necromancy referred more to speaking with spirits of the dead. But in the Middle Ages, necromancy came to mean anybody who invokes and communicates with demons. And demonic ritual magic refers to the art of conjuring and deploying demons for various purposes. And some of those purposes was the sexual manipulation of people, finding lost or hidden treasure, increasing hunting skills, and acquisition of hidden or secret knowledge. The tools of demonic ritual practice for demonic ritual magic were surprisingly rooted in strict religious discipline. The magician would practice strict religious discipline in order to gain control over the demons. So some of the ways that this discipline would be practiced would be abstinence from sex, prayer, confession, communication, meaning the Eucharist, and penance. And often this means like mortification of the flesh by a flogging or other uncomfortable self-torture methods. And the rituals of Christian liturgy, especially the rituals of exorcism, were often written into these demonic rituals because these exorcism rituals were thought to have inherent power to call and control demons. There were many tools associated with ritual magic and recurring practices. So demons were often identified by the prepared Christian operator by invoking first the name of Christ and or God, and God was often identified through a long series of mystical names that all referred back to God. Incense was sometimes used. Magical equipment such as rings, magical symbols, and magical circles were used. Magical gestures and movements were used. Times of operation were often restricted to certain days, hours, or astrological times, or weather conditions. And demonic rituals often include petitions for angelic assistance in discerning the truth and avoiding being deceived by a demon, and to help aid in receiving direct illumination and direct knowledge. So demonic ritual magic becomes the inspirational basis for Faustian drama. And Faustian drama refers to stories about magicians who willingly invoke and establish pacts with the devil to attain power, pleasures, and other benefits. And the cost of this infernal gift is selling one's soul to the devil. So in order to achieve this end, the magician must first use demonic ritual magic, such as I've been describing, to bring the devil forth and communicate with it. And this story, the Faustian story, is the basis of many famous plays, the two most famous of which are Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus and Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's Faust. And sometimes Faustian drama surrounds objects, such as the 13th century Bible. So what I'm saying when I say that is that sometimes Faustian dramas have arisen around actual objects. And so one example of that is the Codex Gigas, which means the giant codex, aka the Devil's Bible, which is held at a national library in Sweden. And so the Devil's Bible is a 13th century illuminated manuscript that contains sacred material, including the Old and the New Testaments, and a body of knowledge that was considered sacred to the 13th century Benedictine order. And the Devil's Bible, however, also contains material that the Benedictine order considered heretical and demonic. It has a huge illustration of the devil in it, which you see in this image. 3 invocations are in it. 2 magic spells are in it, and those spells were maybe designed to ward off possible evil caused by the image of the devil in the book. And according to one Faustian legend, the Devil's Bible was created due to a deal a sinful condemned monk struck with the devil to save their own life. And you can learn a lot about the Devil's Bible and this legend if you follow this YouTube link I have here, and it's a fun video to watch. So the Faustian legend of the Devil's Bible goes like this. According to one version, that was already recorded in the Middle Ages, there was a scribe who was a monk, and he broke his monastic vows, and he was sentenced because of that to be walled up alive. And so in order to avoid this harsh penalty, he promised to create in one night a book to glorify the monastery forever, that would include all human knowledge. And near midnight, he became sure that he could not complete this task alone, so he made a special prayer and not addressed to God, but to the fallen angel Lucifer, asking him to help him finish the book in exchange for his soul. The devil appeared, completed the manuscript, and the monk added the devil's picture out of gratitude for his aid. And in tests to recreate this work, it's estimated that reproducing only the calligraphy without the illustrations or embellishments would have taken 5 years of nonstop writing. And the entire thing with illustrations would have probably taken more like 10 or 15 years. Nevertheless, this story about the origin of this book is a very popular legend. The invocations and spells in the Devil's Bible are protective. The first conjuration in the Devil's Bible is against sudden illnesses, and in it, evil is addressed with magic words. There's a list of magic words that are shown here, and then accompanying signs of the cross. And the next 2 conjurations in it are against feverish states, and one of them apostrophizes, which means makes kind of pleading calls to the 7 evil sisters of Satan, and they are to be expelled from a servant of God through the invocation of various events in the life of Christ, as well as angels, the Holy Virgin, John the Baptist, the evangelists, and the apostles, the prophets, and the various saints. So expelling these sisters of Satan, it comes down to essentially exorcism. So there's an exorcism ritual in the Devil's Bible. Here is a link to a digitized version of the Devil's Bible, so you can look through it yourself. The term Faustian refers to Dr. Faustus and to Faust, and when we use it today, it largely refers to stories and plays about a legendary practitioner of demonic ritual magic named Faust or Faustus. And so the Faustian legend has been transmitted to us primarily by 2 playwrights, one being Christopher Marlowe, who was a contemporary of Shakespeare, and the other Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who was an 18th, 19th century playwright in Germany, and Goethe is as famous, really, essentially should be, but most people would say that Goethe is as good a playwright as Shakespeare, and he does compete with him for that title of great playwright of the world. Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus was written in the 16th century. The play is about an educated rebel who has earned a PhD in divinity or theology. He's unsatisfied, though, with the limitations of knowledge from his education, and he wants to transcend what the study of God and the world allows. So for that reason, he conjures a low-level devil named Mephistopheles. And with Mephistopheles' help, Faustus sells his soul to Lucifer. And in exchange for that, Mephistopheles provides Faustus with many years of health, power, knowledge, and pleasures. But at the end of the agreed-upon span of year, Faustus is dragged to hell by the devils he once controlled. And this is the basic structure of the Faustian legend. In Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, Mephistopheles explains after being conjured that he cannot serve Faustus truly because he serves Lucifer. And when Faustus asks what power made him come to him, Mephistopheles says, "When we hear one rack the name of God, abjure the scriptures and his Savior Christ, we fly and hope to get his glorious soul." Thus, blaspheming against or inverting Christian symbols results in manifestations of the devil. And this image you see here is a production of Dr. Faustus, directed in 2006, and as you can see, demonic symbolism is central to the piece. Marlowe's Dr. Faustus versus Goethe's Faust. In Faust Part 1, Johannes Wolfgang von Goethe's Faust sells his soul to the devil, just as takes place in Marlowe's play. However, in Faust Part 2, God decides to forgive Faust and takes his soul out of the devil. In Faust 2, God decides to forgive Faust, and he takes his soul away from the devil, Mephisto's power at the end of the play. So in Goethe's Faust, God wields his power over the devil, despite the fact that Faust sold his soul to hell. And in Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, God is more legalistic, and he allows human beings the free will to send themselves to hell if they so choose. Goethe's Faust is a work of romantic literature, and that's one of the reasons that Goethe contradicts the popular story of Faust going to hell at the end to pay for the crime that he's committed. In Goethe's play, Faust is confused and makes poor choices, but he's not totally separated from God, even at the height of his sin. And God provides the hope for salvation rather than anything that Faust does or says. And this theology aligned with ideas held by the German Romanticists of the 18th and early 19th centuries, because they held that the human beings were simultaneously sinful and divine. And this idea was affirmed in the ending of Faustus Part 2. And I've attached a link here at the end that you can enjoy of a full-length film by Murnau, early 20th century film, and it's a version of Faust that was inspired by Goethe's version of the story. I encourage you to keep learning about the concepts that we've talked about in this lecture, and please contact me if you have any questions regarding research.